friends. I'm your host, Dr. Dave Layton, and thank you for joining me in our journey to hope. It is my desire through this podcast to bring you information about how to discover, sustain, or perhaps regain hope. In this episode, I'm speaking with a new friend, Tracy Ripley. I came across Tracy through a shared podcast service, and I was very interested in learning more about her thoughts on hope. Now, I'm going to let Tracy introduce herself, but she's also an author, and she's written a book called Prayerful, let me say that right, Prayerful Warrior Mom. And she was just telling me about a new outreach effort, so we'll get her to tell us a little bit about that as well. Well, hello, Tracy.
Hi, Dave.
Thank you for being on the show. It's an honor, and thank you for your time. A very precious gift to give time, so thank you for that. Let's start by you telling a little bit about yourself, please.
Sure. Thanks again for having me on. So my name is Tracy Ripley. I'm actually a retired finance executive. I spent 27 years working in accounting and finance, and 10 of those years I was also raising two young children. Um, I married my husband, who also had two older children. So I have two stepchildren, and then we have two together. So um, as any career mom knows, that balance of trying to grow your and move up in your career while also raising your children is already a challenge. But I had the additional um, challenge of having our youngest son was born with a congenital heart condition. In 2013, he was diagnosed, and it came as a shock to us. All of our other children were healthy, and everyone in our family had not had this, had not been diagnosed with this. We've later found out that there are others that also have the condition, but our son was the first to be diagnosed. And that really kicked off a series of hospital stays. He had his very first emergency surgery, heart surgery at 5 weeks old. And it really has been, as the book is called, a journey with learning how to find balance as a career woman who, I was working for corporate America. I was moving up into higher and higher levels. And with each new role came more responsibility, but it also meant more strain on my time with my children, with my family. And then as I said, with my youngest son being born with the heart condition, that alone requires more time. And of course, as a mother, I wanted to be there for my son. And
Right.
so that's really where the book kind of walks everyone through that journey and trying to find that balance. And it doesn't sugarcoat things. It does talk about the hard things, but it also gives the many blessings that our family was able to see and witness along the way.
Okay, good. I'm glad to hear, especially that last part. Sometimes we get caught up in the all the other things that are going on and forget to look a little bit about the blessings in it. By the way, you made me think about something. Did you ever see the movie Pollyanna with Haley Mills?
Oh, I don't know if
Okay.
I've seen that movie.
Okay. I really encourage you to watch that movie. It's a great movie. Pollyanna, she sees joy in everything. My favorite scene in the movie, Carl Malden is a preacher, and he's out there, and he's a fire and brimstone preacher, and he's outside practicing his sermon, and he's just yelling and railing on them. And Pollyanna sees him and hears him, and she tells him about the glad game. But one of the things she said in that scene was, um, there's over 800 rejoicing verses. And that what you said made me think about that. We can find blessings in a lot of things. And
Yeah.
uh, people say, well, how can you find a blessing in the fact that your child is suffering congenital heart disease? Oh, yeah. Uh, we could start listing.
Yes, yes, and I actually talk a lot about that. I call it, God's grace,
Hmm.
and so many times that when you look back and think, why did I go through that, or why did that happen? And too often I would look back and say, well, that was God's grace. That's why.
Yeah. Um, I talk about my journey to hope, going through a pretty deadly strain of leukemia, and it says, what's good about that? It has opened more doors than I can ever imagine, experiences and things like that. So yes, we can find the blessings in things. Okay, all right. So was it that your son having the congenital heart disease that actually started you on your current life pathway?
Yes and no. So as I mentioned, each time I picked up a new role at work, there were more responsibilities. And I really, probably the last 5 years of my career, I was working as a finance partner for, a business that was well over a billion a year. So, we had a lot of different parts, and I was just being pulled in so many different directions, and having to work 60 and 70-hour work weeks. And I kept feeling like this cannot be the life you wanted for me, Lord. And I kept praying and saying, you know, is if this is my life, if this is what I'm supposed to do, then show me how I can use it for you, and how I can show others the light that I've seen. Help me to spread that. And so there were a series of things that happened at work that just really, the pressure just continued to mount, and it just the gas, they never let off the gas pedal, let's put it that way.
Yeah.
And so things ended up, it just kind of fell into place that I was able to access my pension early, and I applied and was able to take an early retirement. And after making that decision, I found out 2 weeks later that our son was going to require his second open heart surgery.
Mm.
And so I knew then that God was preparing me for the season that I needed to be present with my child. I did not, there were so many times in the hospital when my son would have different surgeries or hospital stays that I would be beside his bed with my laptop on my lap working, while also getting up and, tending to the beeps, or, whatever it was that he needed. And this particular time, I was not going to have to do that. I was present with him. I was there for his recovery. When he came home, I was able to focus on him. We did schoolwork so that he did not fall behind that year. In fact, it was the first time that he actually made honor roll. By the end of that school year, when he went back to school, he was on the honor roll. And it was just a blessing to be able to, because I was so worried he missed so much school. I didn't want this thing to be another thing that he was, blaming or saying,
Mhm.
look, I ended up having to be held back in school because of, this heart issue I have. And I didn't want him to, fall victim to that. So that was just one of the blessings. But to go back to your question, so as I was kind of dealing with, he was back at school, he was doing well, he was recovering, and now I was home. And it was the first time in my life I didn't have work or someone to care for. And I was really struggling with what next for me.
Okay.
And I kept praying to God and asking, what is it? What's next? Do I go back and find another job in this similar, finance role, or what is this for me? And I had a dream one night. I woke up at 3 in the morning, and I had this thought, and I couldn't recall if I had dreamed it, or um, if I actually heard. It was almost like I heard someone say, "You should write a book." And so it was really strange and it kind of stuck with me for a few days and I sort of waved it away. And then I started seeing things pop up, online. I'm reading these things about how you can self-publish. And I ended up scheduling a call with a company that was like a coaching company. They could walk you through the process of all the things you needed to do. And I still wasn't sure. I was like, I don't know. I really don't think that this is, for me. Who am I to write a book? No one's going to want to read my story, right? That's what I'm telling myself. And I talked it over with my husband. We scheduled a call again. And then I made the leap to share my story. And that's where my book was formed. I started physically writing the book in February of 23. I had the rough draft ready to go by mid-April.
Okay. Um, wow. You've said several things in there. Some thoughts came to mind. A good friend of mine is an author also, and he talks about, just start writing, even if nobody reads it. Um, write it and enjoy the remembering and working through and all of that. Early on, when you were just talking a little bit, isn't it wonderful when we discover or see the providence of God working in something? And
Yeah.
all too often, it's after the fact. And I think we can see the providence of God working if we go into something as quickly as possible saying, okay, how can I use this for the Lord or serve the Lord, or what is the good in this? And helps us see that. So you were able now to discuss that from the afterwards. You saw it, you understood it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Living it, it's so hard not to allow, and this is what I've learned since then, to allow the enemy to put that self-doubt and that I'm not worthy, who am I? And I've started to realize that God gives us gifts and each one of us has a different gift. We've all had different experiences. And when we can share those experiences about how God has worked for us in our lives and help someone else to see that, I think that's opening up the door for their gift, for them to be able to see, well, how can I look at my own life and my own experience and share what God's done in my life with
Yeah.
others.
Yeah. Um, the name of the author escapes me right now, but the name of the book is called Wasting Time with God. And the author talks about those of us in a relationship with God, it's not wasting time. But one of the things he says in the book is uh, tell others your God story and then listen to their God story. And so I enjoy doing that, and I appreciate you sharing it. One other thing that came to mind, I was writing some notes down. I'd like to tell people, look, you have to have a relationship with God. We all have a relationship, a good one or a bad one. But the earlier we begin to build that relationship with God, the easier it's going to be to understand and to see and to make it through those challenges to our hope. When we are in the midst of that storm, it's we can certainly build that relationship with God, but it's better to have already had that than we can go into that not by ourselves and much better armed. So, and
Oh,
you did that.
absolutely. Yeah. And I will say, I think each time you do that, that builds your resilience because one, you've watched yourself go through something very difficult and you survived it, especially if you had God on your side. The one thing when I look back, and this was very apparent when I wrote my book, the moments when in my life when I tried to do things on my own I told you I was working 60 and 70-hour work
Yeah.
weeks, and I was just doing. I didn't have enough time I didn't make enough time in my life to go to church, to read God's word, to fellowship and talk with
Hmm.
others. I was just work, and
Or
trying to
pray.
do what I could yes, right, or pray. And those were the most difficult times. Those were the
Mhm.
hardest times in my life when I really felt I can't get through this. And it was only when I turned to God and said, I need your help. Please, I cannot do this on my own. I can't do this without you. That when then and only then when I moved forward, did the load feel lighter? Did the burdens and the fear feel lighter or even in some cases leave? Um, because I was focused on him and his promises of what as a Christian and as a child
Mhm.
of God that he wants for us. And those were the things I tried to focus on as opposed to clinging to oh, woe is me, or look what we have to go through.
Yeah.
It just it's a different way of looking at it. I feel like it's opening your eyes to see things that maybe we were blind to when we just focus on what I call the darkness.
Yeah. While you were saying that, another thought came to mind um, about uh, I can't, but we can. And
Yes.
the verse from Matthew 11:28 through 30 jumped into my mind where Jesus says, "Come unto me, all who labor and are weary, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you. Learn from me." So yeah, uh, we know we're not alone. We have each other. We have the Lord, so we can meet these challenges. All right. Um, I want to use that kind of as a segue now, and let's talk about hope a little bit. My
Sure.
show is about helping folks discover, sustain, or regain hope, especially in times when their hope is challenged by things that occur in life, and all of us face challenges. Mine was greatest challenge, other than self, was when I was dealing with leukemia. It
Mhm.
sharpened my focus. In your case, with your son. By the way, how old is your son now?
He's 12 now.
Oh, wow, great. That's a great age. He's on the
Yeah.
threshold of discovery. That's wonderful.
Yes.
Okay, so let's talk about hope a little bit. I'd like to know your thoughts on it, how you understand the concept of hope.
Sure. So I actually touch a little bit about this in my book.
Okay, good.
And I talk about that hope is not, hoping we're going to win the lottery or hoping for a new car. Hope to me is believing and trusting, as I said, that God is a promise keeper, and that I believe it's in Hebrews where it says you can trust in the Lord because he cannot lie. And he has told us time and time again throughout scripture, both in the Old Testament and the New Testament, of who he says he is, a promise keeper, a way maker, a chain breaker, he broke the chains while Paul was in prison. And so that is who I clung to, that hope in him that, I didn't always know the outcome that we were facing. And many times I could have turned and thought that it was going to be my worst nightmare. But I didn't allow my thoughts to go there. I kept my thoughts and my prayers on God and trusted that whatever lay on the other side, he was going to be walking through that door with us. He was going to be holding my son's hand, and he was there with me, whatever the outcome.
Great. Yeah. I like what you said. Uh, God's a promise keeper. Absolutely. Absolutely. And your view about believing and trusting. And I tell people, yes, we have that view of I hope something happens or I hope something does not happen. Okay. But if that's all you got, you're missing something there.
Yeah.
We hope in something, not so much hope for something.
Yep,
So that was,
absolutely.
thank you for sharing that. I know as I was looking through your website, looking through some of your comments and everything, I, either you said the word or you communicated the word resilient. That was a big part of what you did. Could you talk a little bit, please, about your thoughts about how resilience helps us sustain or maybe regain our hope?
Yes, sure. So, what I like to talk about with resilience is, um, I don't think you wake up one day and all of a sudden,
Uh,
you're resilient and you can walk through all these challenges that I've been through. And if I had to face them all right at the beginning, I don't know that I would have had the tools and the gifts that God led me through, uh, if I would have faced them all at the same time and all in the beginning. And so when I look back and see each step of the way, God prepared me for the challenge or, um, whatever hurdle it was we were going to face, whether that was
mhm,
at work when I was, moving into a new role and working with, a group that had all type A personalities and they all needed something from me. And as I said, I was stretched very thin. Or if that was facing my son's first open heart surgery when he was 4 years old, each step of the way, I learned how to tackle those things, whether that was learning how to set healthy boundaries, learning to ask for help, whether that was at work or at home, and also learning to forgive. And forgiveness for me it was, it took a lot of years to kind of finally get there. Um, but for me, learning to forgive was part of being resilient because in my opinion, it takes more resiliency to learn how to let go of anger, let go of the resentment that can take up all of the room in your heart and leave no space for God or any, happiness, joy, love, all of the fruits of the spirit that he promises us. If you allow anger and resentment to take up everything, your thoughts, your actions, um, and sometimes that anger comes out. You may have thought, and this, I'm talking to about myself. I thought that I had let go of the anger and the guilt that I was also feeling as a mother. Even though I was not to blame, his condition ended up being genetic. I carried a lot of guilt. I was angry because we almost lost my son at 5 weeks old because of
mhm,
a misstep from a pediatrician. He waved
mhm,
away my concerns, sent me home. And thankfully, we ended up at the cardiologist just in time. My son was in 12% heart function when he was admitted for his very first heart surgery. And so I had so much anger in at myself also for not pushing hard enough, not saying, can you at least call the cardiologist or maybe even calling the cardiologist myself. So as you see, all of that was just filling myself, even though, I told myself I forgive him, I've moved on. I even, years later, I was still kind of wrestling with that. And I really had to have spend a lot of time praying and looking to scripture, learning to think about it from Jesus's eyes. And when he was on that cross and he looked to the man beside him who was a thief, but he asked for forgiveness. And Jesus, who was suffering and was innocent, could forgive and forgive even the people who were doing, um, just horrendous things.
yeah.
I had to look at it through eyes of Jesus and be able to finally let that go. And that was so freeing. And to me, when you can do that, everything else that feels tough or feels like, it could just knock you to your knees. When you're able to free up your heart and put all of your faith and look to God in prayer, to me, you can walk through any battle. You can stand up with God beside you and fight those battles with him, not on your own, not through works of our own, but with him and through prayer. Um, that to me is being resilient.
You didn't necessarily communicate it specifically in the words, but the value of resilience is found quite often in the fact that overcoming these challenges to our hope is not something that's going to happen immediately. It's going to take time. And so we have to be resilient and work through that. And there'll be good days, bad days, whatever days. And so you've got to keep working through that. And that kind of goes back to what I was saying about you need to go ahead and start building that relationship with God now, strengthening that relationship because Satan's not going to leave us alone. Things are going to happen in our life that challenge us. And so we're not in it by ourselves because if we have that relationship with the Lord, we have him and each other as well. So yeah, takes time. So you got to be resilient. That's wonderful. That is wonderful. And I'm glad you said you talk about it in your book. By the way, on my webpage about hope, our journeytohope.com, got to throw that in there. Um, I have a resource page, and I'll put a link to your book on that page. But I'm also going to put
Thank
a
you.
link to your book and to your website on the show notes for this podcast because I want folks to go there. I think you have some wonderful things to say and to share, and somebody out there needs to hear it. We all need to hear it.
Thank
Anything
you.
else you want to add, Tracy? I've enjoyed this. Don't need to stop. Keep going.
No, no, I guess if I summarize, and I kind of use the same summary in my book that, and you touched on it, that too often I think we feel like we have to do things alone, especially, and not to cut anyone out, but as a mom, I feel like there's so much pressure by society that, oh, you're a working mom, you got it all together. You have to kind of keep up that persona, I feel like.
Mm,
And so when you have to ask for help, it almost feels like you're a failure.
mm,
Um, and for me to say, I felt alone when I had all of these people around me, doctors and nurses and, my family, my husband. But at that moment, when I was going through all of those surgeries, especially when my son had the heart failure, it was easy for me to feel like I was all alone and had been abandoned. But when you have that relationship with God and you're able to call on him and talk with him, put all your worries on him, um, then you'll realize that you're not in this alone, and you do not have to face the battles alone if you know, develop that bridge to him. And I talk to him throughout my entire day. I don't know that there's anything I do without him. And I think that you really, your point about building that relationship um, over time, then even if you are sitting in a room alone, you will never feel alone
yeah,
because you'll have God by your side.
yeah. I repeat it almost every show. I'm passionate about we are not alone.
I mean, my son's the one that endured most of it, but as his mother, my heart was breaking right alongside with him. I wanted to take so much of that
Yeah,
and live it myself, or if I could, to feel the pain and not allow him to go through that. It's a very hard thing to go through. But I think what makes it even more touching is because we know and we felt God with us, that it makes me feel sad for the people who don't know what that feels like.
yeah, yeah. Oh, makes me feel desperate to show them, talk to them.
Yes,
Um,
yes.
yeah. By the way, one of the unexpected, wonderful joys that came out of it. Um, I have four daughters, and one of my daughters, Natalie, uh, she and her family lived up in the Seattle area, and we were down in Alabama, central Alabama, where we lived, and Natalie and I, when she was growing up, she was a number three daughter, and we had a lot of challenges between the two of us. Uh, we drew incredibly close during that time. She got on that plane, came down, was with mom whole time in the hospital. Uh,
Oh.
yeah, so there was that part of it. Okay.
I have a theory about that. I feel like so a lot of times people in the heart community, especially the ones that maybe are not believers, will say, how can a God allow this to happen? Our creator,
Yeah.
how can he
Yes.
allow such things to happen to an
Yes.
innocent child?
Yes.
And so that I know it's easy for people to kind of go there. But for me, I always come back and say, look, God didn't cause this to
No.
happen. He didn't, do this to my son. But out of this, he used this experience and he used all of these challenges that we've been to draw us closer to him, to make
Hmm.
me appreciate that I knew him and that I came from a family that, taught me about faith and about Jesus because I was able to use that to lean on him. And with every challenge that we faced, my faith grew stronger. And and now my children are, seeing that and I'm sharing those things that maybe they were too little to see. But now when I talk about it and say, oh, that was God in our lives. And,
Yeah.
he had you the whole time.
Yeah. Yeah. Why does God allow this to happen if he's such a loving God and all of that? And he didn't bring sin into the world, and he helps us
No.
through it when we allow him to. You said it. If my view is how can I deal with this, uh, old preacher friend of mine used to say, "You have eye trouble."
I like that. Yeah,
Yeah. He also said, "Why do we have to be flat on our back before we look up to heaven?" So,
it's
all right,
true.
we're not alone. We're not alone. We
Yeah.
have each other, and how wonderful it is to discover other folks that are in there with us. That's a wonderful thing. Tracy,
Yes.
I have enjoyed this. Thank you.
Thank
I
you.
I
Likewise.
I appreciate again, providence of God. He brought us together. Always
Yes.
does.
He's
Okay,
helping me
good.
meet such amazing people.
Yeah. Oh, I know it. I know it. I was telling somebody just today. One of the joys of podcasting is I have met some wonderful people. So thank you for your time. Okay.
Thank
Well,
you.
let me wrap up, my friend. Well, friends, thank you for joining Tracy and I as together we journey to hope. I trust in some small way we have encouraged you to discover, sustain, or regain hope through this effort. I invite you to contact me if you have any questions or comments, or if you wish to share with me something you've experienced in your journey to hope. My email is info@ourjourneytohope.com. That's info@ourjourneytohope.com. Please share this podcast with someone whose hope is being challenged. I look forward to sharing more with you soon. Again, I'm Dr. Dave Layton, and thank you for listening. And until our next episode, remember, we give all glory to God our Father.